This is a Fender Rumble 25 bass amp. This was brought to me by a good friend, and he wanted me to just take a look at it. He said, yeah, if you can do something with it, great. If not, that's cool too. Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of the best woven guitar, bag, and camera straps on planet Earth. And now the best is even better with a new line of hand-woven Maya Serape straps with USA organic herringbone hemp backing. Get 10% off when you use the link in the description, and remember, when you support my sponsor, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it. Hey, how's it going, dudes and dudettes? Brad the Guitarologist here. It is about 4 o'clock in the morning. I can't sleep. My sleep schedule is all screwed up. So I thought, what the hey, I might try to throw something on the bench here and take a quick look at something that will hopefully be easy. I'm not sure what's wrong with this one exactly, but we're going to find out here. This is a Fender Rumble 25 bass amp. This was brought to me by a good friend, and he wanted me to just take a look at it. He said, yeah, if you can do something with it, great. If not, that's cool too. It didn't seem too bothered about it. Right now it doesn't have the speaker in it, but I do have the speaker separately that he brought to me in a box. Probably first, just go ahead and pull the chassis. That way we've got the big box up off the desk. And we can probably even just set the speaker and the chassis up here side by side. It's small enough, it could probably fit it both. So let's go ahead and do that first. Okay, so these are fairly ubiquitous little practice bass amps. I mean, they made a zillion of these things. Not quite as many, of course, as the guitar amps, the Rumbles, but they still made a bunch of these. So it's very likely that this is going to solve a lot of people's problems if we can figure out what's wrong with this one. I'm sure these have their common issues. And it looks like it has a lot of screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 screws holding this thing in. You know, of course, you don't expect a whole lot for what you paid for these things new. But I've never really been big fans of some of these more modern practice amps just because they're just usually made of some really crappy materials. I'm sure this is a very, very thin, crappy cabinet on this. I don't know if this is going to be a chip board or if it's going to be more like an MDF kind of board. Some of these are better than others, but I've pulled amps out of dumpsters before that had no other problems other than the cabinets were dropped and broken because they were made so cheaply. Here's what we're looking at inside. Power stuff is coming in over here, so this is the power board and this is the preamp board. Just offhand, I don't see anything obviously burned, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything. So let's go ahead and we'll set this thing down and we'll get a little closer look. Okay, so first things first, I want to hook up the speaker to the speaker leads, which are right here. I do want to make sure that these don't short themselves out, so the easy thing to do would be to use the actual connector, but the connector is kind of hard. It's not hardwired, but it's kind of connected pretty well into the cabinet, so you can't really take the connector out easily. So I think I'm just going to connect these gator clips kind of one high and one low sort of configuration. First thing I want to do is just really fire it up and see what it does or doesn't do. Dial it up slowly. Got a light. It's a good sign. I can't remember what he said this thing is doing or not doing. I've got no sound. I wonder if it has some kind of switch on the input. I'm going to have to get probably a schematic at some point anyway, but I just want to see how far I can get screwing around without a schematic first. And also, there's not really a whole lot to this thing, so... Well... Yeah, so it has a... It's working fine. We've got an overdrive and we've got a contour switch. Let's see. The controls need to be cleaned. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with this thing, man. I wonder what he was getting on about. I think probably what he was thinking was he didn't hear any hiss or anything when he turned it on, most likely. I bet you that's the case because it's pretty quiet. I mean, when this thing is not plugged in, it's deathly quiet. I mean, you can even turn it all the way up. I've got the volume cranked. And I can hear a tiny hiss, but it's deathly quiet otherwise. I'm going to try to dial it all the way up to 120 and just see if something fails, but I kind of doubt it. Just from what I'm seeing here, it looks to me like everything's okay. Alright, so there's 120 on the input, so let's plug it back in. And we'll just kind of... Okay. So now it's not working. I wonder if it'll start working if I dial down the voltage again. Huh. Well, isn't that interesting? Okay, so it obviously did work for a second, and now it's not working. So why is that? Intermittent things like this can sometimes drive you nuts. I'm wondering if it might be power supply related. Probably we should probably test what's coming off of this cable right here. It's coming off the power board. There is a cable. You can see that one, that ribbon cable coming off the power board and over here into the preamp board. I'm wondering if the preamp board simply lost power, but then again it can't have, because there's a... No, that can't be the case, because we've got an LED light on the front that's lit up right there. I don't know if you can... Yeah, you can see it barely. That LED light's lit up, and it's getting powered from that preamp board. So, okay, so at any rate, let's see. Hang on. Alright, we got 24 volts there. So we do have some voltage coming in, but I'm wondering if it's a situation where we only have part of the voltage that we need coming in. 24 volts there, so 24 there as well. Whoop. Okay. So we do have voltage coming into this front board, so I don't think that's it. We do have some voltage here at the output. Okay, so we're getting voltage down to this point as well, down to the output. I think whatever it is, it's almost got to be in the preamp. I think I want to come out of the headphone jack and go into that amp up there and see what's going on with that. See if we can get some sound that way. I've got a little tiny something there. Not much. So that at least that tells me I'm getting input into the board. I mean, and it worked just a second ago as well. I wonder if I'd flip it off and then turn it back on, if it would just work. I mean, see, you can hear it. Here's my desk amp. So we're getting something out of the headphones. It's not much, but we're getting something. Well, there's a lot more. Now that we've got it only partially in, so that's probably short. That's grounding itself out. So if we put it, there's one side of the headphones, and that'll be the other side of the headphones right there. So I think the headphones are stereo. Yeah, we've definitely got something wrong with the output, so we need to figure out what that is. I'm wondering if the speaker connection might not be great, or whether that output IC is intermittent. That could be the issue also. Alright, on this board they give us a couple of test points. You can see the little TP1, TP, that's TP11, TP1, TP2, TP for my bunghole, TP3 up there, and so forth. And in the schematic they actually give you some voltages that you should see at those points in milliamps with the volume at 50%. So we want to look for AC voltage, and we want to put a signal through it. So I'm gonna use the signal generator on this. Let's see. Alright, so that'll be a 1 kilohertz sine wave coming into the front end of the amp. Now it says with the volume at 50% you want to test it. I'm not even going to bother with test point 1 because I'm pretty sure that that's okay. But I'm going to come off of test point 2. I should see 153 millivolts AC at test point 2. Well, it does say with the volume at 50%, but it's hard to see where the volume is. What did it say? What did I say? 153? Seems somewhat low. We've got 76 right there, but again, the volume. Yeah, I mean, we've at least got signal there at the very least. We got amplification on test point 2. Okay, test point 3. In terms of signal, should it be that far above test point 2? We got 153 millivolts at test point 2. Test point 3 calls for 100 millivolts, so it actually should be a little bit lower in amplitude. And it is. Okay, so anyway, following the signal on down, we've got, where's test point 4? Okay, so that's coming out of the contour control, test point 4. There's a test point 4B as well, so that's contour in, and then contour out is 4A. 5, so we've got signal up to 5, 6, 7, is louder still. Test point 8. Whoa. Okay, test point 8 is where it gets really loud, and that is test point 8 is after. Wait a minute. Test point 8 is after. That's on the speaker out. Yes, it is actually. It is. I wonder if the problem is in the headphone jack, because there's a. If you look close at the headphone jack, the output routes through the headphone jack, because obviously the headphone jack has to be disengaged, or when you plug headphones into the headphone jack, that will actually disengage the output. So I'm wondering if, I bet you that is what's happening. I bet you that's what's happening. The headphone jack is probably disengaging the output, probably. I'm gonna flood that headphone jack for. Hang on, let's do this. The other thing too is this headphone jack is facing upwards, so that could be an issue. Could definitely be an issue. Hang on. Now, I know this is gonna be. It's gonna be hard to ensure that this is clean just from up here, but I'm gonna do my best just with this, and we'll come back to it. But there's a contact in there, obviously, that's going to be engaged when there's no headphones present. But you can see what I mean. It's like, it has to route through the headphone jack first. So let's see. Let's fire it back on. I'm wondering also if it might be this, if it could be this output connector or something in the pathway between the headphone jack and the output. Okay, that was weird. What happened there? I stuck my probe to 10 and 11, test points 10 and 11, and then brought it off of those test points, and then it came to life. It's back to life now, but I wonder if I shut this thing off, is it gonna die again, Let's try it. We'll shut it down and we'll bring it back and see what it does. No, it's coming back up. I can't count on that happening every time. There's something's intermittent for sure. But the thing is, we know that just from what little we've seen so far, just going to test point 8, that the output was working, but why wasn't it getting to the output speaker if that's the case? I'm gonna take these ribbon cables off, and we'll clean those. I'll clean all the ribbon cables, and we'll come back to it. Okay, here we are with the board pulled, and if you'll recall, I was talking about the headphone jack and how I suspected this headphone jack might be part of the problem, and I think the ground gets lifted, so that would be this first contact right here. This contact has to contact another little piece that's over here on the side. You see down there the other piece that's going up into the board. Well, if I turn the board over, and if I look at the solder joint, see it? You see that? So that could be the issue. Also, we have a capacitor C33, this .01 capacitor right here, and it has a little what looks like it could be a cold solder joint right there too. So I'm gonna resolder. I'm gonna hit all these solder joints on this headphone jack, and we'll see if whether that solves the problem. I mean, it can't be helping. And that looks to me like that solder joint right there is in very poor shape. So that's a definite possibility, and that's right there in the path of the output as well. So that would make perfect sense for everything that we've seen if that was the problem. I've also come in and I've cleaned the heck out of. See how this solder just kind of goes a little bit gray? That's because they used lead-free solder on these, and I'm adding a little bit of leaded solder to that, and it just, you know, it doesn't make the prettiest solder joints, but it should be a lot better than that. Should be a better connection than what we had. Let's try it now. I think that's probably going to solve the problem. I'm also going to clean the contacts on this ribbon cable leading to the output just to make sure that wasn't an issue. But yeah, I'm thinking that could definitely have been the problem. We do have to make sure that we put this board back in all the way, because it gets its ground through these little contacts right here. Probably should hold off on putting this all back together, but I at least want to get the jacks, the nuts on these jacks at least. And coolest thing, probably one of the coolest things at least that anybody's ever sent me, these rocket sockets, man. These things are just freaking cool. It's easy to grab a couple of them, and man, they work really well. I had this thing apart in seconds because it's just so easy to use these. Okay, so that's hooked up. Let's get our speaker hooked back up. All right, good. Phew. Okay, so the output's definitely there now. It's there at the speaker now, so. Okay, so I think the problem's solved. I honestly believe it was that headphone jack all along, and that's my guess, and I'm sticking to it at this point. Okay, so one more thing before we put it back together, I want to spray these controls. I'm going to power it down, power it up a couple more times just to see if it's, if it continues to behave. and it's seeming like it's going to. So anyway, let's get this back in the cabinet and give it a test in the cabinet. Okay, so tell me about your Kiesel.
It's a Kiesel Thanos, brand new at NAMM 2020. Headless jazz bass. It's actually kind of it's reminiscent of the old SB model they had. This one's made of alder, quarter sawn, 2-piece neck, 18-volt system, active passive, 2-band boost cut preamp. The Kiesel, what are they called? Vintage Alnico pickups, and they're cool. Yeah, 18-volt system.
And you said alder, 6 bolt.
Yeah, I want to say it's a 2-piece alder body, like right from the headpiece little thing, how that works.
Oh, right, yeah.
So you don't need like double ball end strings or anything. You can do just normal strings. Because dig this, like dig how they sit in the bridge. They're kind of sitting in this little kind of horseshoe little thing, like the ball end.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And so you loosen it all the way this way, and then it releases the ball end. And then when you put it back in, you start tightening it so it just stays in. So you don't need to have a ball end on either end like the old Steinberger system. From what I understand, there was only a few of these, like between like 8 and a dozen of these made for Winter NAMM. And some of us, the guys who have a relationship with the brand and everything, we were lucky enough to get these at NAMM, and we're kind of trying to show them off. But this one here, I played all weekend at NAMM, and I just couldn't. Every time I came back to the booth, I just played it because it just has that. It has that really awesome jazz bass tone. Like I just really dig it.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
Anyway, so this thing sounds pretty good. Brad fixed it up good.
Very cool. Where did you find it?
The Doesn't Work bin at a music store up in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, where my parents live.
The Doesn't Work bin being like the dumpster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.